Tokyo, Japan. My name is Gary Verheller, and I'll be your host for what we call the Substance of Living podcast. Today, we'll look at what we call life's lessons. And I hope this will provide you with some insight, maybe even some inspiration to life's challenges. Hello, and welcome to episode 75, part 1, Work-Life Balance, Time for Myself. I've worked with many executives, many CEOs or presidents, and a lot of them had terrible work-life balance. Why? Well, generally I've found that the executive would believe that work is more important and ignore my personal needs. That's backwards. If you want to give your best, you have to be at your best, which means you have to make sure that you get good rest, good exercise, good food. You have to make sure those are the physical needs, that you have those in your life on a daily basis. That's very, very important. If you want to give your best, you must be at your best. That also includes incorporating what you love in life. I've met a lot of people saying, I really don't like my job. I'm really bored. I'm really disappointed in life. I don't like my job. And almost always, they're living an unsatisfying life. Now, great people who live a highly productive, generally successful life are living a highly satisfying life because they've incorporated what they need and what they love into life. It's interesting, many of the executives I work with have forgotten what they need and what they love. So one exercise I do is I ask them, what did you do and what did you love or do you love in education, in work, and in life? And they're unable to answer it. They blank on it. They give partial answers. So I break it down even further. I say, okay, time. Let's talk about this. First, we'll talk about knowledge, what you've learned. Second, we'll talk about skills, what you've learned to do. Third, we'll talk about abilities, what you've learned to do well. And fourth, I want you to talk about what your interests are. Knowledge, skills, abilities, interests. And I'll tell them, that's your homework. Write out in detail about what you've learned to do, what you've learned to do well, and your interests. They come back, it's usually pretty incomplete. And I'll say, okay, well, let's look at knowledge. Okay, so you went to university. You learned this. So you learned nothing in high school, huh? I'll say, how about junior high school? How about elementary school? Did you learn anything there? And they'll say, well, yeah, I didn't think about that. I'll say, okay. So that's one area. So from education, what did you learn in all of those areas? And my suggestion is go back chronologically to when you went to your first class. It could have been kindergarten. It could have been daycare. What did you learn in the first class? And go all the way up to when you finished your education. Now let's talk about what you learned from work. What was your first job? I hadn't thought about that. What did you learn in the first job? How about your second job, your third? What have you learned from work? Now let's shift life. What have you learned outside of work and outside of life? What did your parents teach you? What did your friends teach you? What did you learn in elementary? And I always suggest going chronologically, it's easier to keep track of it. So what did I learn before I went to school? From my mom and dad, maybe, from my brothers, my sisters. What did I learn when I got to kindergarten? What did I learn there? What did I learn in elementary school, junior high? And they're just, wow. And it's very, very true that they had a difficult time doing that with interests, and interests are usually pushed over to the side. Oh, knowledge is important, skills are important, abilities are important. Interests, well, that's secondary. That's what. No, it's very, very, very important. Because interests are your passions. Interests are what you love. Interests are what you need. It's what drives you, what motivates you. That's really important. And a lot of people have just put those on the side. Well, that's just me. No, wrong. So it's very, very important to incorporate those interests. And you can break it down from education, from work, and from life, and go chronologically from the very first time you went to a class to the very first job you had to what you learned as a kid, and do it chronologically. This will really help you. For example, all my life, I've loved riding my bicycle. I got my first bicycle, I think, my real first bicycle, it had 3 speeds. It was a Schwinn. It was a black. It was my bicycle. It wasn't my sister's bicycle. It was my bicycle. I rode my sister's. She would let me ride it. And it was her bike, really. I didn't have my own. I had my own bike when I was about 8 years old. Freedom. Independence. I could ride my bicycle. I would ride my bicycle for hours, going someplace new that I'd never been before. Exploration, adventure. To this day, I ride my bicycle. It's something that I've incorporated into my life. It makes my life better. I love walking. I've walked all over Tokyo. I love walking. Again, independent. See how much I can see. See the architecture, see the bridges, see the sculptures all over Tokyo. So what I've done is I've incorporated that into my life, into my work too, because my bicycle carries my 2-wheel bag when I go to the subway or go to the train station. I've made it part of my life because it enriches my life. Time for myself. That's what this is about. And also find ways to put that into my work. I have my own company. Independence. I'm my own boss. In this way, I am responsible for meeting each client's demand. And I love working with different people. I work with diplomats. I work with scientists. I work with business people. I work with executives. I'm so lucky to have such a wide variety of people with which I'm working. And that triggers my imagination and helps me learn about this area of science or this area of business or this area of diplomacy. It's just wonderful. It enriches my life. I love learning. I've incorporated that. I love dance. I love percussion. So I'm moving to music many times when I'm exercising. When I'm running, I'm listening to music. I incorporate that into my life. When I'm riding the subway to go to an appointment, I'm listening to maybe classical music. So I'm incorporating this into my life. My success is my responsibility. So having my own company, always learning more and more on how to better serve my clients, that enriches me. I've incorporated things that I love into my job, into my life. And as a good friend of mine says, it doesn't feel like work. It's fun. It's enjoying life. And I thank Bunga for that. So, rediscover who you are, particularly your interests, what you love, what drives you, what's your passions, what motivates you, and incorporate those into your life. Get those into your life. And it will serve to enhance and enrich your existence. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today for the Substance of Living podcast. If you'd be kind enough to consider subscribing, you can contact us through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or connect on Twitter. Join us again next time for what I hope will help you navigate life.